Let me just preface this by saying that since the 60s, until his death, and even long after his death to some extent, Michael Jackson wasn't a pop star, or a celebrity. Singer, dancer, actor, not even close. Michael Jackson wasn't a star. He was a goddamn supernova.
Michael became arguably the most famous human being on the planet.
I don't think I need to say much about MJ. He was just larger than life back in the day. But he was more than that. Michael Jackson was also a gamer. Just like you and me. He was a Sega fanboy of sorts. He probably owned a Space Harrier cabinet. Probably next to his Liz Taylor shrine. Apparently he had a shrine dedicated to Liz Taylor. This is knowledge that doesn't benefit me or you in any way whatsoever. But when I do these kinds of videos, I'm just subjected to learning facts I don't ever want to know. He had a decent business relationship with Sega. Rumors about him working on the soundtrack for Sonic 3 were all over the place. For the longest time, I had no idea, but I wanted to believe he did. And it was proven that he did, in fact, work on Sonic 3. And we can thank the godfather of blast processing, Yuji Naka, for tweeting something he probably shouldn't have tweeted. NDAs be damned. Is it tweeting or Xing now? Does anyone use the term Xing? I mean, Elon still calls it Twitter, so... The fuck was I talking about again? Right, so we know that MJ was involved in Sonic 3's development, and some of the music of that game was replaced in the Sonic Origins collection, with fans modding the original music back in. You listen to the credits music of Sonic 3, and then you listen to Stranger in Moscow. It is literally the same song. Here's Sonic 3. Here's Stranger. For every step forward, we take 2 steps back with this hell site. We're here to talk about Michael's other contribution to the world of service games, Moonwalker. Released 1 month apart in 1990, Moonwalker started out as an arcade beat-em-up, but it became a completely different game when the Sega Genesis version came out. Perhaps the arcade version was beyond the limitations of the Genesis. Sega had done something similar with a game like Shadow Dancer, with both the arcade and home versions being radically different. Both games were tied to the Moonwalker movie that came out around 2 years prior, and served to capitalize on the success of the movie. It got mostly mixed reviews from critics. But despite that, the movie was still a hit. It didn't exactly break the box office during its theatrical run, but the VHS of the film was certified platinum 9 times in the UK, and the Leave Me Alone segment won a Grammy for Best Video. It also dominated the Billboard video charts at number 1 for a while. So the film must be good, right? It's not the first time he did a movie. The Wiz and Captain EO came out prior to this, and MJ's music videos were practically movies. And Jackson had plenty of huge connections in the film industry. High-profile filmmakers like Martin Scorsese.
Pronounce your last name for me.
Scorsese.
Sassy.
John Landis, and Francis Ford Coppola, for example. We can just ignore those critics because who listens to those idiots anyway?
2 hours later.
It was something. I should have listened to the critics. Depending on who you talk to, Moonwalker was either the most amazing movie they've ever seen, or a complete waste of time. Wikipedia calls it an experimental anthology musical film. I call it a really long music video. Actually, one of my favorite things to do now is to go back and watch one of MJ's videos and watch the backup dancers. Jackson just makes them all look like shit in comparison. Nobody comes close to the king of pop. Okay, so you know that movie that Mr. Burns made? The one that was just Mr. Burns flexing his ego the whole time while trying to make himself look like the greatest human being alive? That's basically Moonwalker. Most of the movie was just, look how cool Michael is. Then the actual movie starts. And the actual Moonwalker movie, at least what I consider to be the main plot of the movie, doesn't start until about 35 minutes in. That's 1/3 of the 90-minute runtime, by the way. I mean, Moonwalker had a lot of heart, but football in the groin had a football in the groin. Masterpiece. The story is that Joe Pesci wants to give drugs to kids, and maybe a spider infestation here and there.
Bugs and drugs. Bugs and drugs.
I could probably get behind this cause. I'm sure there's a downside I'm not seeing. Pesci does the thing where he says his plans out loud for everyone to hear, and MJ gets busted eavesdropping. So they find him and shoot him. Nah, actually he survives, transforms into a car, dances in a retro 30s club for some reason. One of the kids gets kidnapped. I don't know which one. I don't care enough to know their names. Then MJ turns into a fucking transformer, kills Joe Pesci, explodes into fireworks, comes back unscathed, and refuses to elaborate on any of this shit. Because they gave MJ story and production credits and he went apeshit. That's like giving Dr. Doom the keys to a Gundam. And who's gonna stop MJ? He could buy their house and give the deed to Bubbles. I mean, it's not a bad movie in the slightest. It's just a bunch of random music videos and shit slapped together like one big Frankenstein's monster that was labeled a movie. And when the plot wraps up, there's like 15 more minutes of time they need to fill. So have another music video, I guess. There's so much padding for a 90-minute film. Do we need a dance number with MJ and a claymation rabbit? Do we need MJ's entire life story before the film starts? Do we need the plot to stop so MJ can dance with gangsters? Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that whole scene was dope as fuck. There were a bunch of producers and directors and people working on different segments of this film. Maybe there were too many cooks in the kitchen. The kids were okay, I guess. They were all better actors than Michael, if I'm being honest. Don't know who that is. That kid became Raijin in Kingdom Hearts 2. Voice actor credits are always full of surprises. And that's John Lennon's kid. So not only do we have the son of a Beatle, but we also got a cover of Come Together here too. To be honest, I'd rather be forced to watch this movie on repeat than have to call Yoko Ono my mother. That shit terrifies me.
Now, from the imagination of Michael Jackson comes a movie like no other.
And you know when anything becomes a success in America, it needs to be capitalized on. July 20th, 1990, a joint effort between Sega and Triumph, Moonwalker the arcade game was released. Jackson had contacted Sega about making a video game, and he oversaw a good majority of the game's production. Not only did he want the game to capture his aura, but he also didn't approve of physical violence. So what we got is a beat-em-up with no punches. It's crazy when you think about it. That's like if Sega decided to make a game where Sonic couldn't run. Could you imagine that? Wait, what do you mean they did? When? Which is why all of his attacks in the game are dance magic bullshit attacks. Jackson's just out here charging kamehamehas and blasting gangsters, dogs, and zombies. Supposedly, this game was pitched around 2 years prior by Jackson, which coincides with the release date of the film. The Genesis version would come out about a month after the arcade game's release, and the game would have synthesized renditions of Jackson's music, all coming out of the Sega System 18 arcade hardware. The same hardware used for games like Shadow Dancer, Alien Storm, and much more. So let's fire this bastard up. Yeah, that's the sound it makes when you put a coin in. Hang on, let me credit feed this game real quick. Wonderful. Basically, you just rescue kids and blast everyone and everything that moves. This does kind of follow the movie to some extent. You're still rocking the smooth criminal outfit, and the kids sort of resemble the kids in the movie, but not so much the robots and the zombies though. I guess they needed to flesh out the roster, and now we're going to the music videos for help. Take a few dudes from Thriller, a few dudes that look like they came from the Beat It video, and a few robots with giant protruding dicks. Because why not? You don't remember Michael Jackson dancing with penis robots in that one video? But seriously, I hate these damn things. Tons of health, never stay still, and of course the whole... Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Round 5 is full of these damn things. And they even have those one-wheeled bikes that Mr. Garrison made. We also get some gangsters that throw stuff at you, laser-shooting robots, ghosts, that's right, fucking ghosts, and this buzzsaw-throwing robot that puts my anxiety through the roof. Sega actually went with an isometric game instead of the usual 2D look for Moonwalker. I do feel like the view does make it a bit harder to judge whether or not I'm clearing the bullets, or if my shots are gonna land or miss. Are you fans of isometric games? Sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it fucks with me mentally. but it does help Moonwalker stand out visually compared to the rest of the machines you would find in the arcades in 1990. It does have its moments where the visuals do shine, like Jackson's dancing. It's actually really well animated, and they captured his dance moves very well. The only downside is that he's the only one with more than 3 frames of animation during these dance attacks. Even in video game form, he makes his backup dancers look like shit. Music quality is pretty much what you would expect from the hardware at the time, but when he dances, you hear the actual studio recordings of his songs for a brief moment. It's not bad. Credit where credit is due. Toru Nakabayashi did fine here. He's got a ton of Sega games under his belt. Altered Beast, Thunderblade, Golden Axe, Virtua Racing, and various others. According to Sega Retro, he now sits on the board of a company called FPS. That also reminds me, people who worked on the original Shinobi and a bunch of those System 16 games worked on Moonwalker, and it shows. I actually enjoyed the game. It's ridiculous at times, especially when MJ turns into a robot when he reunites with Bubbles. That's right, we got a Robo Jackson blowing shit up. For the children, of course. Nakabayashi did the arcade version, but the Genesis version was done by Hiroshi Kubota and Takayuki Nakamura. Supposedly, Kubota had written music that sounded like Jackson's music in case they couldn't get the license, but those were left on the cutting room floor. Kubota worked on the first 2 Sonic the Hedgehog games as a sound programmer and sound assistant alongside composer Masato Nakamura. As for Nakamura, Genesis Moonwalker would be his second video game credit. His first would be E-SWAT. He worked on the first Streets of Rage as a sound programmer, and he would go on to compose music for Virtua Fighter and the critically acclaimed Guys. It is cool to hear some of Michael Jackson's greatest hits in 16-bit format. They really do lend themselves to the System 18 well, and the Yamaha 2612 in the Genesis version too. And it makes sense. Jackson used Yamaha synths on his albums, the Bad album especially. The instruments have that similar sound, and we get a bunch of 16-bit renditions of Beat It, Billie Jean, Smooth Criminal, you know, the usual suspects. And Another Part of Me, which plays in the cemetery level and not Thriller. Why is that? Sit down, kids. It's story time. Another Part of Me was a track on the Bad album, but prior to Bad's release, it was actually in Captain EO. It was a short 3D film that became an attraction at Epcot in 1986, and after watching it, I feel like EO would have made for an interesting video game concept. Jackson in space with a bunch of aliens. It could work. Imagine Francis Ford Coppola's resume for a second. The Godfather trilogy, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Apocalypse Now, Captain EO. But back to Another Part of Me. Why is it playing in a graveyard? Was there even a graveyard in the movie? If there's a level for Thriller to be playing in, it sure as hell should be this level. It's the same story in the Genesis version, and apparently the Rev 00 version of Genesis Moonwalker, or Revision 0, has bits of Thriller in the game, with later revisions removing those bits entirely. It was all a licensing issue, as Thriller was written by Rod Temperton, and not Michael Jackson, and only songs written by Jackson could be used in these games. But the 16-bit version deserves a shout-out, because it does replicate Thriller pretty well. Now, I do have a gripe with this version of Another Part of Me, and the Genesis version as well, and not because it reminds me of getting dogpiled by zombies. That sucked, but I digress. The rhythm just doesn't have that groove like it's supposed to. Here's the arcade version. Here's the actual version. You're not making this easy on me, are you? Okay, kids, plan B. Here's what it's supposed to sound like. The notes are too straightforward, and it sucks the life out of the song. It's a minor gripe that most gamers probably wouldn't care about, but it's enough to bug me. By the way, if you're wondering where my username comes from, it comes from this thing. And it comes from this guy. I like cyborgs. And as a fellow musician myself, I do take the time to shout out all the composers of each game I talk about on this channel. Because good music can make a good game better, and it can make a crappy game better too. In fact, this is actually my second channel. Here's my first one where I used to do covers of video game music, but this channel was pretty much dead and abandoned once this one started getting monetized. I apologize to all 12 of you who subbed. I didn't think Moonwalker Arcade was too hard, but they do throw a bunch of dudes at you, pretty much the entire way through. You just get mobbed constantly, just like Jackson in the paparazzi when he goes anywhere in real life. Perhaps he was using this game as a hint that he wanted to be left alone. So use your dance attacks wisely. It's a full screen attack that kills the weaker enemies and damages bosses. Use them up and you will be overwhelmed, even if you've got a buddy or two with you. The red and black MJs that only exist in dreams. You get bum rushed in Moonwalker by all kinds of shit. It ain't easy being the king of pop. You don't get to transform into a car, but you do stay as a transformer for the rest of the level. And the children here are a lot more receptive of Robo Jackson than in the Genesis version. Each level ends with the showdown with the boss, or Pesci himself. This is like the second game on this channel where Pesci tried to kill me. As if this 4'1" dwarf could ever hurt me in real life. He'd probably bruise my shins pretty badly though. So we show Pesci that the power of love and friendship and the power of the Allspark are more than enough to save the kids from bugs and drugs. And sometimes I see visions of a prototype Dr. Robotnik in some of these fights. And these cool boss fights never happen in the Genesis game, which I plan on talking about right now. And as a heads up, I did not enjoy this game. Arcade Moonwalker was a short, somewhat ludicrous, but enjoyable adventure. But having to recreate that on a less powerful home console would be impossible, so a traditional side-scroller would be more feasible. We still get the dance attacks and the children, and the Mecha Jackson blowing up everything. So why did I not enjoy this on the same level as the arcade game? There really isn't much I can add to this review that the angry nerd hasn't already said about it. He pretty much hits the nail on the head with a lot of the issues I had with Genesis Moonwalker. The levels are a mess to navigate. You're expected to know that you can go through sewers and walls, and these bombs can fuck right off. Even if I played this game religiously, I probably couldn't remember the locations of every kid, and I'd probably get lost along the way too, which happened more than once in the later levels. I feel like the levels just get worse the longer you play, assuming you have the patience to beat this from start to finish. And it's also much longer than the arcade game. Much longer. 5 rounds in the arcade, but now each level has 3 acts, and I wouldn't call this a boss encounter. It's more like they just throw a bunch of shit at you and tell you, here, deal with it. I don't even care about the kids anymore. You can have them. But I still get to keep the drugs. And what's the deal with Bubbles telling me where to go at the end of each level? Couldn't the level just end? Couldn't I encounter Mr. Big at the 3rd stage of each level or something? That would make more sense, wouldn't it? I've never played a game where I needed to be led to the boss. And by the way, there are no bosses in this version. At all. You just get dogpiled after every level. Would it have killed them to add even one boss fight? You have a blueprint right here. The plot is still the same. Save the children, and kill Joe Pesci. Again, you have to search every square inch of each level to find the kids, because they're not out in the open anymore, and they're all the same little girl from the movie. I guess Sean Lennon and that kid who played Raijin took up too much memory or something. The levels don't really have a point A or a point B. You're free to just move around and go wherever in order to find the kids. At least none of the locations were too cryptic. Except for that one waterfall in the cave. How was I supposed to know you could enter it? I spent like 10 minutes on this level. Fuck this cave. It's got spiders and giant webs. It's got all the worst enemies in the game in one convenient location. And these damn entrances make no sense. I go in here, and logic dictates that I should spawn in front of this hole because that's the hole I came from. But no, I spawn above the hole. Either put the hole up here if this is where I'm gonna spawn, or spawn Michael in front of the hole. This is my hole. It was made for me. That's right, we got a Junji Ito reference in a Michael Jackson game review. I'm slowly losing my grasp on reality the longer I do these videos. But the thing that really gets me is that some of these holes have kids in them, and some of them don't. Some of them have a shitload of spiders or zombies everywhere instead. And you just have to know not to trust these holes. This game requires you to memorize every single location of every single kid, or you'll be blowing yourself up and getting trapped with spiders. I'd rather have Joe Pesci give me the drugs instead of the spiders. But at least the spiders dance with you. Maybe that's a side effect of the drugs. Moving on.
Michael Jackson's Moonwalker.
The dancing has always been the best part about these games. It all comes from this health bar down here. Blue is good, red is bad, none is more bad. In the arcade game, the health bar was just a health bar. Here, the health bar not only functions as your health, but as a special attack meter of sorts. You have a jump button, an attack, and a special button. You can do spin attacks, launch your hat, or start a flash mob.
Come on, where's everybody going?
But all these special attacks do take up health. One downside is that you can't move and the enemies will get a free hit on you. Another downside is that the dance attacks require half of your life to pull off. But it is an instant kill for anyone who dances with you. But there are stronger enemies later on that have more health and won't die from it. And then you have to fight them with yellow or even red health. Red health takes away the sparkly magic shit that Michael kicks with. We got Michael throwing fisticuffs with zombies in a graveyard. But he also didn't approve of physical violence. What? I just take the death and try again. Speaking of zombies, they are the worst enemies in the game. The soldiers have the intelligence of squirrels with CTE. I can take them. But the zombies have a bunch of hit points and the game spams these bastards at you. The ones that separate and fly at you are a fucking nightmare. Why are there so many zombies? I know, thriller. But I'm still calling bullshit. As far as I know, the kids aren't randomized. They always appear in the same spots on every playthrough. But having to remember where the 7 kids are when there's 25 trunks to look through? That's not happening. I could play this game 50 times and I'm still not remembering where all the kids and bombs are in every level. Nuts to that. There were only 3 kids in that movie. It wasn't one girl and her 300 twins. Did they make these kids in a lab or something? What were you really planning, Mr. Big? Now, I could go on about my conspiracy theory about Joe Pesci cloning kids in a secret lab, or I can show you Michael Jackson turning into a giant robot and blowing shit up. It makes no fucking sense, but frankly, I don't care. I'm just gonna carpet bomb and desecrate this entire graveyard. Who's gonna stop me? Leo Getz from Lethal Weapon 2?
They fuck you in the driveway, okay? They know you're gonna be miles away before you find out you got fucked, okay?
I don't know which exact kid you're supposed to save first in each level, but if you save that specific kid first, a shooting star falls from the sky. Catch it, and bam. Autobot Jackson. Maybe he should bomb the Recording Academy for giving Off the Wall one lousy Grammy Award. The final encounter with Mr. Big goes as follows. Throw a coin into the air, and if it lands on its side, you win. You're supposed to shoot Mr. Big as you chase him through space, but I feel like I'm pushing directions and buttons and hoping for the best. Before it was just a typical boss fight. Now it's whatever the hell this is. I don't even feel like I have much control of anything that's happening right now. I just press buttons until I win. And that's what happened. You're supposed to shoot down Mr. Big while he fires a bunch of crap at you. Dodge like you've never dodged before. Shoot Pesci about 8 times. Watch him die. Congratulations, you beat Moonwalker. Moonwalker's like a really meme-worthy joke that's hilarious at first, but after you hear the joke long enough, you start to get annoyed. The idea of MJ being a dance magician, Optimus Prime, is campy as fuck and I love it, but it doesn't make the game any less frustrating. This game has some terrible spikes in difficulty. The zombies were a pain in the ass, and level 5 was a nightmare. Traps, and off-screen turrets. So many lasers. Lasers everywhere. If they could, they'd probably strap lasers on the kids' heads too. And one of my biggest pet peeves in gaming is going back and forth in a level to find one missing collectible. Especially if it's in a place I didn't think you could interact with. That waterfall really pissed me off if you couldn't tell. But the game still has a fair amount of charm, and it does follow the movie to some extent, which is more than I can say for most licensed games. And you gotta love the sound test here. We really need to bring this feature back in modern gaming. And you get those little details like the piano actually making noise when you step on it, the moonwalk, the crotch grab, or this woman getting in your way. Listen, I'm the king of pop. You don't get in the way of the king. I guess kicking women really is the solution to everything. And there's probably like 800 different ports of Moonwalker you could play. Personally, I'm just gonna stick with the arcade version. Play it now before the arcade board's suicide battery claims another victim. And if you need more Michael in your video games, check out Space Channel 5. I totally forgot he was in those games. Look, this is, for the most part, a gaming channel. We talk about video games here. I'm not here to talk about what MJ did, or didn't do, or allegedly did, or allegedly didn't do. Let's just say the concept of MJ saving kids didn't age very well. It's the reason the Simpsons episode Stark Raving Dad is missing from Disney+. It's why Weird Al Yankovic won't perform Eat It or Fat anymore. And why certain countries refuse to play his music on the radio. It's the kind of stuff that YouTube demonetizes videos for if you speak up about it. But I did research some of Michael's history for this video, and a lot of it was interesting to say the very least. He didn't have a normal childhood like most kids. He was thrust into the spotlight early and he stayed there for the rest of his life. He had 6 gold records by the time he was 11. He did go to school, albeit rarely, and had private tutors to compensate. He was physically and verbally abused by his father when he was a kid. Even his siblings were abused as well. Sure, Jackson was stupid rich and he makes more money dead than you'll ever make alive. But he never really grew up. He could have an entire 2,700-acre ranch, 50 nose jobs, a Liz Taylor shrine, and groupies lined up across state lines. It didn't matter. Hell, he celebrated Christmas for the very first time when he was around 35, because he was a Jehovah's Witness growing up. It paints a picture of someone who wasn't given the one thing he needed the most. The one thing he couldn't have despite his talents and his success. A normal childhood. A normal life. And I think that's something we all take for granted without realizing. They had to empty out an entire grocery store just so he could experience shopping for the first time without getting mobbed. That's how famous he was. And besides, talking about the allegations, or taking a side in all of this isn't gonna do me, this channel, or any of us any favors. Jackson's fans can be very, very passionate. And that's putting it lightly. That's one less headache I need. He's been dead since 2009, so it really doesn't matter what I do at this point. I was around for the trials back in the day, and his acquittal, and now I'm seeing that decades-old Band-Aid getting ripped off once again when the 2 Leaving Neverland documentaries came out. If you're not familiar with it, it's about some of Jackson's victims and their testimonies about being abused by Jackson, and the backlash was to be expected. The accusers' alibis were deemed contradictory, and the whole documentary was panned for being, quote, journalistically unethical and one-sided, with people like Boy George, Madonna, and Macaulay Culkin speaking out against the documentary. Leaving Neverland also breached a non-disparagement clause from '92, which led to Jackson's estate getting into some intense legal battles with HBO. And Leaving Neverland 2 won't be on HBO or Max for obvious reasons. So do with all that info what you will. Was he a troubled individual? Absolutely. But was he an abuser? Or just a big, weird, 50-year-old child? With all the testimonies, debates, a thorough FBI investigation, lack of decisive evidence, a passionate fandom, and the one man who knew the truth, taking all the answers to the grave with them, we may never know for sure. I will say that you should never, ever leave your kid with a stranger or a celebrity under any circumstances. no matter who they are. And let's hope we never become Michael Jackson famous. Damn it, Mike. Why couldn't you be a good boy like Yuji Naka? He never did anything wrong, and he doesn't have a criminal No wait, bad example.